Democrats have just announced that they will not seat a North Carolina Republican as a result of widespread election fraud in North Carolina. Now, this is all in regard to the 9th District in North Carolina, and it was a race between a Republican who seemed to do some shady things in order to get elected. Mark Harris is his name, and he was running against Democrat Roy Cooper. Now, there were allegations of voter fraud, and those allegations were looked into, and as a result, Republicans in the state of North Carolina agreed that it would be wrong to officially certify the election until the investigation came to a close. And now that January 3rd is quickly approaching, the incoming Democrats, or the Democratic majority in the House, has decided that they will not confirm Mark Harris. Now,
sorry, one quick correction. Anna just misspoke for a second. Roy Cooper is the governor of North Carolina.
Oh, my bad, I'm sorry.
The Democratic candidate was Dan McCready. It goes to Cooper in a lot of ways now that the election board has been dissolved.
Yes.
And so the governor has to appoint a new election board.
Yes, okay, so the election board has been dissolved, and that's the other part of the story, which is huge. And part of the reason why that happened is because there was a court ruling. So a filing came a day after a 3-judge state court panel denied a stay to keep the state elections board, which is investigating the allegations, in its current form, and actually ordered the board to dissolve at noon Friday. The board had apparently refused to certify Harris as November's winner amid evidence of irregularities in the absentee ballot count and reports of a fraud scheme directed by a Republican operative hired by Harris's campaign.
Yeah, this almost shouldn't be a news event. Obviously, they shouldn't seat him. There was voter fraud. It's not just our opinion. The Republicans on the election board said, yeah, no, do not seat him. There is massive issues here. It was a unanimous vote. Every Republican on the election board said, do not seat him. There was potential significant fraud in this case. And we've told you this story before. One of the people who worked for Harris, allegedly, but those allegations are very, backed up by a lot of evidence, took the ballots of people, changed the name if they voted for the Democrat, put in the Republican instead. If they left it blank, they said, oh, good, don't worry, you told me, so you voted. And then they would fill in the Republican name. And then if none of that worked, they just throw away the ballots of the Democratic candidates. So as big a voter fraud case as I've literally seen in my lifetime in America. So should you seat that guy? Of course not. It's not even remotely within the realm of consideration. Even Republicans in North Carolina have conceded that it is very likely they'll have to redo the election, which of course they should.
Yeah, and it's gonna cost everybody a lot of money. And you think about the amount of money that was put into the campaign to begin with. Is it really worth this, whole cheating fraud thing and then just to get bounced? It's just stupid all around, and it's unfortunate.
But Harris barely, quote unquote, won even with the fraud. So he might be thinking, yeah, I mean, I'm in trouble now because I hired the guy who, the person who did the, allegedly did the fraud in the first place, had a significant history of doing similar things. And so Harris knew that when he hired him. But he might be thinking now, look, I would have lost. I 100% would have lost without the fraud. So hey, at least I got a second shot, right?
Yeah, look, of course, a second election makes sense. I'm not even having a conversation about whether or not that should happen. But the real conversation should be real consequences,
yes.
Criminal charges, because this is serious. And look, just to juxtapose the way certain people are treated in the country, there was a US resident. Now, she wasn't a citizen, but she wanted to vote, and she thought that voting was actually legal, right? Because she's a US resident. She's not in the country illegally, but she's not a US citizen. So she cast her ballot, and when she got caught, she was like, I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to vote. This is my first time voting, and she got sentenced to prison. She's gonna be in prison for several years.
And we've seen a few of these stories come out where individuals thought they had the right to vote and accidentally voted, and they are punished heavily. And it's completely absurd when you compare that to these candidates who are clearly committing fraud, and especially if they go unscathed. You're absolutely right. They need some kind of punishment.
Right.
So you guys, why do they get such heavy punishment for that because the Republicans want to prove a point. Like, oh, look at how serious voter fraud is. That's why we have to make sure that we have voter ID laws and block a quarter of all African Americans in the country who don't have driver's licenses from voting. And so they're trying to prove a point. Okay, you want to prove a point? This is actually technically ballot fraud. The person who they think did this is Leslie McCrae Dowless. I mean, if you're going to give a couple of years to someone who did it accidentally in just their own case, I guess you should give a couple of decades to this person. And furthermore, okay, that's clear. I mean, they should throw the book at this person. It is the worst case of ballot fraud again in my lifetime. And but on top of that, why is Harris allowed to rerun? I mean, the Republicans can pick anyone they like, presumably for the new election. Harris picked Dowless knowing their background, knowing that they had serious allegations of this in the past. So that's the guy you want to rerun? Okay, have at it, host. But the voters in the 9th District of North Carolina should know that the Republican in the race picked a crook and did, and at a bare minimum, looked the other way or was completely incompetent as this fraud was happening right underneath his nose. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.